Well, it's Sunday morning, and that means it's time for the hook of the week. Welcome back to Black Bear Forge. Last week we made this fairly simple but elegant looking tulip finial hook out of a piece of round bar that had a big washer on the end. It's actually a bolt out of one of those big cable spools, and the thing is way longer than we needed for this hook, so we have some of that left. And what I envision making out of this is actually some kind of a ceiling hook using this big washer as a flange to mount it to the ceiling, and ideally the bolt head will then provide a pivot point inside that if for some reason you want to turn the hook. It's not going to be some sort of a ball bearing pivot, so you can just reposition it and hang a plant on it if it matters which direction the plant turns, but you're not going to be able to spin anything on it. It's not that kind of a pivot. To do that, I think we need to first get this flange off of here and get it cleaned up so it will pivot. Right now it's rusted on there solid. It's not moving, but I think if we get it hot, we can drive it out no problem. And then we'll proceed with the actual hook part. We'll probably use about this much of this bar. This is roughly a 3/8 bar, maybe a little smaller, 9 or 10 millimeters, something like that. And we'll use 6 or 8 inches of it. The exact sizes on any of these projects don't really matter. I'm just using what's in that bucket of scrappy material, or useful treasures as I prefer to call it. You should use whatever is in your bucket of useful treasures that you've been collecting over the years. Okay, hopefully that bolt head will fit. It doesn't fit, but it came right out. That's kind of what I figured it would do. So we're going to let this washer looking thing cool. And we'll put 2, 3, or 4 holes in it. I like 3 for the looks, but if we do 2 or 4, they can line up on a 2x4 framing member in a ceiling, and that would make it stronger. So I'll have to think about that. If it goes in my ceiling's a board ceiling, so it doesn't matter. Now with this, I think the first thing I want to do is kind of clean up the end and maybe round this some so it will pivot just a little bit easier. So I just want to kind of work it in this ball swedge here, just to make sure there's no sharp edges. This ball swedge is actually some kind of a massive industrial rivet setter. And that round shank just fits my hardy hole fine. So that's just the way I use them. Clean up this shoulder a little bit. I'll probably finish cleaning this up with a file. I think we'll probably be more reliable in the long run. That's really all we need to do. You're not going to see this part of it. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any sharp corners to dig into the flange. So the next thing would be to cut it off somewhere in here. Again, exact sizes don't matter. This is coming out of my stash of materials. You got to adapt to whatever's in your stash of materials. So I think we'll cut it off about there. Try not to cut all the way through on your hardy. Your hammer will appreciate it, and so will the hardy. Plus, you don't shoot this across the room that way. I'm just going to draw out a nice taper like I generally do. We start square. So we start square, and then we'll go octagon and round, making this a fairly long taper on this particular hook. We're going to go ahead and round it up. Some hooks I leave the taper square. I think this one will look better round. I generally don't put my touch mark on simple hooks like this, but you're more than welcome to if you want to. This one I might put it on the little mounting flange. Now we want to put a curl on this, but we have to make sure it's going to fit back through here, or we have to assemble the hook before we put the curl on. And I'd really rather forge this without assembling it. So I'm going to have to make sure that's going to fit through that hole. Oh good, that's cool enough to hold. Makes that a lot easier. I would like a fairly good sized curl on this if I can get away with it. And kind of something like that to get it looking just right. And that fits just fine, so I think we're okay. Next, let's bend this into a hook. And today I think we'll use a simple jig just to show you what that looks like. Now this little adjustable hook jig is one somebody sent me a while back. It has two different sizes for two different sizes of material. It's a nice, useful little jig. Also then allows you to come back into it and get the back bend on the hook, which is something I really want on this particular hook. And then we can lightly hammer on this as well, just to kind of close this up and make that part look better. I think I would like a little bigger curl, but we'll do that after we assemble the hook. So for now, just want to make sure that things are kind of lined up neatly, and I want to make sure that we'll be able to get this on, which we can. So I think what I'll do is use a pair of round nose pliers and unroll that curl and roll it up a little bigger and give some more shape right through here after it's all assembled. So the next thing we need to do is put some holes in this, and then we can assemble it. Now, as I mentioned, I think if we have two holes, this would be able to sit right over a framing member in the house where it's installed, even though there's drywall, and it would be very solidly mounted. 4 holes might look better, but it's probably serious overkill for this. 3 holes I think would look the best, but I think just because it'll be stronger and safer, I think I'm just going to go with the 2. And then if I don't like it, I'll go to 4. But I think that leaves me out of 3 because they'll be oddly spaced. I'm just going to use this little bench punch for this. Really make short work of this kind of stuff. There's our 2 holes. We'll need to clean that up a little bit. That did deform it some. So we can just clean that up right here at the edge of the anvil. You do want it to mount firm to the ceiling. The little gaps look kind of ugly. And we make sure our hook fits, and make sure it turns, and make sure it's loose when it's up against the ceiling here. That's a little bit snug, so I think I'm going to go real quick and I'm going to grind some of that off of there so that it doesn't drag on the ceiling. Okay, so let's see if that's any better. I also took some time to clean up this shoulder, make sure it was nice and clean. Yep, that turns very nice and smoothly there. So the next thing we want to do, actually we'll leave that in there. Now, I said I might put my touch mark on there, so let's do that. And to keep from deforming it too much, I'm going to go ahead and do that cold. It shows just well enough. Now let's put this in the fire. I'm going to take a pair of round nose pliers, and I'm going to straighten the curl a little bit, make it a little bigger, and put a little bit more shape in right through here. I'm just going to take the little bit of the bend out, These pliers can come in kind of handy for this kind of thing. I'm going to fix that a little bit. And I want to try to bend it out a little bit right through here, just to make it look more graceful. Use a smaller pair of round nose pliers and just tuck that in a little bit. That way it's more of a scroll than just a curl. It's always a little fiddling to do here just to get it the way you really want it to look. And like I say, it's entirely up to you. Again, this was a bolt on a big cable spool. The big wooden spools you see along the roads when they're laying underground cables or other underground services. And this is just a washer that keeps it from digging through the wooden spool. So every single one of those bolts has 2 washers on it. For interior work, this is a real good finish. It's perhaps a bit hot. You want it to smoke, but maybe not quite that much. This part of the hook up here is cooler because it wasn't red hot in that last procedure. So we'll wax it and let this cool some while we do that. I want to make sure I get wax down on the inside of this flange because that's a bearing surface, and as this turns, that way it'll wear a little bit better and it's not going to be as big an issue. I would avoid putting oil or grease in there though, because if it drips on your living room carpet or furniture, you're gonna be in trouble. Before it's completely cool, wipe off the excess wax. You don't want blobs. Well, there's a very interesting little ceiling hook. I don't know if I've ever seen one exactly like this or not, but that would be very good for hanging houseplants on. And if you need to turn the hook a different direction to make it easier to hang the plant back up after you've watered it or something like that, it'll be easy to spin that hook around. Now, I suppose if you made this a true dome shape and you put a nice round ball head on the top of this, you could make a hook that would easily hang on a cathedral ceiling or some other sloped surface, and that might be an interesting hook. I didn't think of that. We'll see if we get around to that. I don't know if there are any more of these washers in the bucket. I might have to go outside the bucket of useful treasures if I wanted to try a different version of this, because I think this was the only piece of that was in there. But we will see. There's plenty of options and plenty of ideas in there to make a lot of other kinds of hooks. We've now used that one bar to make 2 different kinds of hooks, and we still have about 10 inches of it left. I don't think we'll get back to this next week. I think I'll pick something else out of the bucket for next week's hook of the week. But later we'll go back to this bar and we will do something with it. Maybe there's 2 more hooks in this. Maybe there's just 1 more hook. We'll see what we come up with. As always, don't forget to make screws that match so that everything is color matched, looks good, and goes together nicely. Your work will look so much better if you just take that little bit of extra step to add that little bit extra value to the hook. I do hope you found that video interesting. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. If you'd like to be notified when I make new videos, ring that bell next to the subscribe button. Then feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends or on social media. But as always, I hope you find time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.